The letter arrived on a morning thick with London fog, sealed with crimson wax and the weight of a dukedom. Eleanor Hartley had not expected to be summoned to Ashworth House. She was the daughter of a country physician, a woman who earned her keep by tending the ailments of the gentry in a modest Surrey village. Her father had saved the previous Duke of Rothmere from a fever that would have killed a lesser man, and in gratitude, the old Duke had promised his son would always offer the Hartleys protection. Now the son, Alexander Blackwood, the new Duke of Rothmere, had called in that debt. She stood in the marble hall, her gray traveling cloak damp from the drizzle, and tried not to feel like an intruder. Chandeliers blazed overhead. Footmen moved without sound. Somewhere above, a woman laughed, bright and careless. "Miss Hartley." The voice came from the grand staircase. Eleanor looked up. Alexander Blackwood descended with the controlled grace of a man who had never been uncertain in his life. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a portrait in the National Gallery. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as winter steel, sharp with intelligence, and entirely unreadable. She curtsied, "Your Grace." He stopped 3 steps above her, close enough that she caught the scent of sandalwood and wool. "You are your father's daughter. You have his look." "I have his temperament as well," she said. "Which is to say, I prefer honesty to flattery." One dark eyebrow lifted. "Then I shall be honest. I have summoned you because my grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, suffers from a malady of the nerves. My physicians have failed. Your father is dead, but his knowledge lives in you. I would hire you as her companion and nurse." Eleanor's heart knocked against her ribs. This was not an offer, it was a command dressed in silk. "You wish me to live here?" "I do." "And if I refuse?" His gaze did not waver. "Then you would return to Surrey and I would find another, but I asked for you specifically." She should have refused. Every instinct told her to walk out of this cold, beautiful house and never look back. But her father's voice echoed in her memory. "The Blackwoods are proud, but they keep their word, and besides, she needed the money." The village practice had died with her father. She had nothing else. "Very well," she said, "I will stay." The Duke inclined his head and something flickered across his face, not warmth but perhaps satisfaction. "Good. You will dine with us tonight. The family should know who will be attending the Dowager." He turned and ascended the stairs, leaving Eleanor alone in the hall. A footman appeared to take her bag. She followed him to a room in the east wing, her mind churning. She did not know, as she climbed those stairs, that the Duke had just sealed both their fates. Dinner at Ashworth House was a study in controlled hostility. Eleanor sat at the far end of the long table, her gray silk gown, the finest she owned, suddenly feeling like sackcloth. The Dowager Duchess, a woman of iron posture and piercing eyes, had not spoken a single word to her. The Duke's cousin, Lady Beatrice Wainwright, occupied the seat beside him, her golden hair arranged in perfect ringlets, her gown the blue of a summer sky. Beatrice had laughed often, touched the Duke's arm with easy familiarity, and turned to Eleanor only once, to ask if she found London terribly overwhelming after her rustic upbringing. Eleanor had smiled. "I find honesty more refreshing than fashion, my lady, but I am learning to appreciate both." The Dowager's lips had twitched. The Duke had looked at Eleanor sharply, as if seeing her for the first time. Now, as the servants cleared the fish course, the Duke set down his wine glass. "Miss Hartley will begin attending you tomorrow, grandmother. I trust you will extend her every courtesy." The Dowager sniffed. "I do not need a nursemaid, Alexander. I need my son's portrait hung in the gallery, and a grandson who produces an heir before this house falls into the hands of that viper in Kent." Beatrice blushed prettily. "Your Grace, perhaps we should not discuss such matters at table." "Why not?" the Dowager demanded. "It is the only reason you are here, child. You wish to be Duchess, and my grandson needs a wife." Eleanor focused on her plate. The roast pheasant was excellent, but she had lost her appetite. She had known the Duke was unmarried, but she had not understood the full shape of his situation. A dukedom in need of an heir, a beautiful, titled woman clearly chosen for the role, and a grandmother who saw marriage as a transaction. "I will marry when I choose," the Duke said quietly, "and I will choose with my head, not my heart." Beatrice's smile faltered, then returned, brighter than before. "Of course, Alexander, we understand one another." The dowager turned suddenly to Alina. "You, country girl, what do you make of my condition? Am I dying?" Alina met her gaze. "Not tonight, your grace. But if you continue to refuse rest and take only brandy for your headaches, you will not see your grandson's wedding." A silence fell over the table. The Duke's jaw tightened. Beatrice gasped softly. Then the dowager laughed, a rough, surprised sound. "I like her, she has teeth." The Duke did not laugh. He stared at Alina with an expression she could not read, something between anger and admiration. "You are bold, Miss Hartley." "You asked for my father's daughter," she replied. "This is what that means." After dinner, as the others moved to the drawing room, the Duke caught Alina's elbow in the corridor. His grip was firm but not painful. "Do not speak to my grandmother that way again." "I will speak to her however she needs to hear," Alina said evenly. "You hired me to help her. I cannot do that if I am silenced." His eyes searched hers. "You are either very brave or very foolish." She lifted her chin. "Perhaps both." He released her arm slowly. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then, without another word, he walked away, leaving Alina standing alone in the shadows. But she had seen something in his face before he turned, something that looked dangerously like respect. The weeks that followed were a slow revelation. Alina rose each morning at dawn, attended the dowager in her rooms, and spent her afternoons walking the estate grounds, learning the rhythms of Ashworth House. She discovered that the Duke rose before the servants, that he took his coffee black, that he read parliamentary papers at breakfast and rarely laughed. She also discovered that he watched her. Not with impropriety, with curiosity. He appeared in doorways, asked after his grandmother's health, lingered in the library when Alina came to fetch books. Once, she found him in the orangery, staring at a letter with such naked grief that she retreated before he could see her. His engagement to Lady Beatrice was announced in the third week of Alina's stay. The news swept through the house like a flood. Beatrice sparkled with triumph. The dowager nodded with grim satisfaction. The Duke stood at the center of it all, his face carved from stone. Alina felt something crack open in her chest, and she hated herself for it. She had no claim on him. She was a paid companion, the daughter of a country doctor, a woman with neither title nor fortune. Whatever foolish dreams had begun to form in the quiet hours of the night, she had to kill them now. That evening, she wrote a letter to the Duke and left it in the library, where she knew he would find it. "Your Grace, I wish you every happiness in your marriage. I must, however, request that my duties be concluded at the end of the month. I can no longer be of service." She did not sleep that night. At dawn, a knock came at her door. The Duke stood in the corridor, still in his evening clothes, the letter crumpled in his fist. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw shadowed with stubble. "You are leaving." "It is for the best," she said. "For whom?" Alina swallowed. "For everyone." He stepped closer and she caught the faint scent of brandy on his breath. "You do not understand. I announced my engagement because I had no choice. My estate is crippled by debt. Beatrice's dowry will save it. My grandmother's health is failing. And he broke off, his voice cracking. "I am surrounded by people who see only the Duke, never the man." Alina's heart hammered. "Then let me see the man." He stared at her, something raw and desperate in his gray eyes. And then, without warning, he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a plea, a confession, a terrible mistake. His hands cupped her face, his lips warm and insistent, and Alina forgot every rule she had ever been taught. She kissed him back. When he pulled away, his breath ragged, he looked horrified. I should not have done that. No, she whispered, but you did. He took a step back, raking a hand through his hair. I am bound to Lady Beatrice. My honor is already in tatters. I cannot offer you anything. Alina lifted her hand to her lips, still feeling the heat of him. Then I will leave. No, the word was sharp, desperate. Stay, please. I cannot bear to lose you too. She should have refused. She should have packed her bags and fled while her heart was still intact. But the way he looked at her, as if she were the only light in a dark and endless winter, undid her. I will stay, she said at last, but you must promise me something. Anything. Do not kiss me again unless you mean it. The Duke's eyes flickered with something that might have been sorrow. I always mean it, he said quietly. That is the problem. The engagement dinner was a disaster waiting to happen. Alina had chosen a simple gown of deep green, wanting to disappear into the crowd. But the moment she entered the ballroom, she felt the Duke's gaze lock onto her from across the room. He stood beside Beatrice, resplendent in black velvet, but his eyes were on Alina. Beatrice noticed. Miss Hartley, she called, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. How kind of you to join us. I do hope you will not feel out of place among so many titled guests. Alina smiled with all the grace she could muster. I have never been afraid of a room, Lady Beatrice. People are only people, no matter their titles. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. How charmingly democratic. The Duke stepped forward. Miss Hartley is my grandmother's companion. She deserves your respect, Beatrice. Of course, Beatrice said smoothly, though her knuckles were white around her fan. I meant no offense. As the evening wore on, Alina watched the Duke dance with Beatrice, watched him accept congratulations with a frozen smile, watched him drink more than he usually did. She tried to stay in the shadows, but her feet carried her to the terrace, needing air. He found her there. You should not be alone, he said, leaning against the stone balustrade. Nor should you, she replied. Your fiancé is looking for you. Let her look. His voice was low, rough. All evening I have been a puppet, smiling, nodding, pretending that my heart is not already given to someone else. Alina's breath caught. Alexander. He turned to her, and in the moonlight he looked younger, more vulnerable. I cannot marry her. I cannot spend my life with a woman I do not love when the woman I do love stands 3 feet away. You have no choice, Alina said, her voice breaking. Your estate, your family, your honor. My honor is already gone. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and urgent. Alina, I would give up the dukedom for you. I would give up everything. I would never ask that of you. I know, that is why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the night. Alina felt tears burn behind her eyes. This was what she had wanted, what she had dreamed of, and it was impossible. You cannot say that, she whispered. Not here, not now. Then tell me you do not feel the same, and I will never speak of it again. She opened her mouth to lie to protect them both, but the words would not come. Instead, she lifted her hand to his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. You know I do. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Then we are both damned. Before she could respond, a sound came from behind them, the sharp intake of breath, the rustle of silk. They turned. Lady Beatrice stood in the doorway, her face white with fury. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you both betray me like this? The Duke stepped forward. Beatrice, listen to me. No, her voice rang across the terrace. You will listen. This engagement is not yet sealed. If you humiliate me, I will make certain everyone knows what kind of woman you have been keeping in this house. Alina's blood ran cold. Lady Beatrice, I am sorry. I never meant to cause you pain. Sorry, Beatrice laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You will be sorry, both of you. She turned on her heel and swept back into the ballroom, leaving Alina and the Duke standing in the ruins of their secret. "What have we done?" Elinor breathed. The Duke's face was ashen. "We have started a war." Scandal broke by morning. Beatrice had wasted no time. By the time the sun rose over Ashworth House, the servants were whispering. The morning papers carried a veiled but unmistakable account of the Duke's inappropriate attachment to his grandmother's paid companion, and the Dowager had taken to her bed, furious and ill. The Duke paced the library like a caged animal. "She has contacts in every paper in London. She knew exactly what she was doing." Elinor sat in a chair by the fire, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm though her heart was shattering. "You must go to her, apologize, repair the engagement." He whirled on her. "You would have me beg." "I would have you save your family," she said quietly. "This is not only about us. Your grandmother, your tenants, your people, they depend on you." He stopped packing, his chest heaving. "And what about what I depend on? What about what I need?" Elinor rose and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "I will not let you lose everything for me. I will leave. Today. I will go back to Surrey, and you will marry Lady Beatrice, and in time you will forget me." He pulled her into his arms, his voice muffled against her hair. "I will never forget you, not if I live 1,000 years." "Then you will remember me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears sliding down her cheeks. "And that will be enough." A knock came at the door. A footman entered, his face pale. "Your Grace, Lady Beatrice is here. She has brought her father and her solicitor." The Duke straightened, his face hardening. "Show them in." Beatrice entered like a queen, her father Lord Wainwright at her side, his expression thunderous. The solicitor hovered behind them, clutching a leather portfolio. "I have come to give you a choice," Beatrice announced. "Marry me within the month or face the consequences of a broken contract." The Duke's voice was ice. "You would blackmail me into marriage." "I would protect my reputation," she shot back. "You humiliated me. You threw my honor aside like a used rag. And for what? A country nobody with dirt under her fingernails." Elinor stepped forward, and the room went silent. "I may be a country nobody, Lady Beatrice, but at least I have never needed to destroy someone to feel powerful." Beatrice's face flushed scarlet. "You insolent." "Enough!" The Duke's voice cut through the air like a blade. He turned to Beatrice, his gray eyes cold and steady. "I will not marry you. I will not be blackmailed. And I will not let you speak of Miss Hartley that way in my house." Lord Wainwright sputtered. "You will regret this, Rothmere. My daughter's dowry was your salvation. Without it, you will lose everything." "Then I will lose it," the Duke said quietly. "But I will lose it with my honor intact." Beatrice stared at him, her rage giving way to something like disbelief. "You are choosing her, a woman with no title, no fortune, no family. You are choosing ruin." The Duke looked at Elinor, and for the first time in weeks, his eyes held no shadows. "I am choosing love," he said simply. "For the first time in my life, I am choosing what I want instead of what is expected." Beatrice turned and stormed from the room, her father closed behind. The solicitor paused, looked at the Duke with something like pity, and followed. When they were gone, the Duke turned to Elinor. "I meant every word. I will lose the dukedom, the estate, everything. And I will do it gladly if it means I can spend my life with you." Elinor shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot, I will not let you." "You do not have a choice," he said, his voice breaking. "I am already ruined. The only question is whether I face that ruin alone or with you by my side." She reached for him then, pulling him close, burying her face in his chest. "Then you will not face it alone." The days that followed were a whirlwind of consequences. The Duke's creditors called in their debts. His political allies distanced themselves. The Dowager, too ill to fight, retreated into silence. And Elinor, watching the man she loved stripped of his title, his wealth, his future, felt the weight of every choice she had made. She found him late one night in the study, surrounded by ledgers and letters, his head in his hands. "Alexander," she said softly. He looked up, his face haggard. "The estate is worth less than nothing. The London house will have to be sold. The land, the tenants, everything my family built for 300 years, gone." Alina crossed to him and knelt beside his chair. "Not everything. You are still here. You are still the man I love." He shook his head. "I have nothing to offer you. No title, no fortune, no home. You would be a fool to stay." "Then I am a fool," she said, taking his face in her hands. "I did not fall in love with your title or your fortune. I fell in love with you. The man who rises before dawn and takes his coffee black. The man who reads parliamentary papers and rarely laughs. The man who looked at me in a ballroom full of people and saw only me." His eyes glistened. "Alina, I would rather live in a one-room cottage with you than in a palace without you," she whispered. "Do you understand that? I would rather be poor and free than wealthy and alone." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. "I do not deserve you. That is not for you to decide." In the weeks that followed, Alina threw herself into saving what she could. She wrote to every contact her father had cultivated, gentry who owed him favors, physicians who respected his memory. She negotiated with creditors, bartered with merchants, and sold her mother's jewelry, the only inheritance she had. The Duke watched her with a mixture of awe and shame. "You are fighting my battles." "Our battles," she corrected. And then one gray morning, everything changed. A letter arrived, addressed to Alina in a hand she did not recognize. She opened it, read it, and felt the floor fall away beneath her feet. "Alexander," she called, her voice shaking. He came at once, his face pale with concern. "What is it?" She held out the letter. "It is from my father's solicitor. He left something for me, something he never told me about." The Duke took the letter and read it slowly. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Alina, this is a fortune, a substantial fortune. Your father had investments, properties. He was not a poor country physician at all." "He never told me," she whispered. "He let me believe we had nothing. He made me work for everything." "Perhaps he wanted you to know the value of what you earned," the Duke said quietly. Alina shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This changes everything. We can pay the debts. We can save the estate." He looked at her and something broke open in his face. "You would do that. You would spend your inheritance on my family's mess." "It is not your family's mess," she said fiercely. "It is ours. We are building something new, Alexander, together." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Then marry me. Not because of the fortune, not because of the title, but because I cannot imagine my life without you." Alina laughed through her tears. "Are you asking me, your grace?" "I am asking you," he said, his voice raw and certain. "Marry me, Alina Hartley, be my duchess, be my partner, be my everything." She looked into his gray eyes and saw the future, not the one she had imagined, but something better, something real. "Yes," she said, "1,000 times yes." They were married in the village church in Surrey, with only a handful of guests and the scent of rain on the wind. Alina wore her mother's wedding dress, simple ivory silk with a lace veil, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. The Duke stood at the altar, his dark hair brushed back, his gray eyes bright with unshed emotion. When the priest asked if anyone objected, the silence was as pure as the morning light. The dowager attended, too frail to stand, but her eyes were clear and her smile was real. She had accepted Alina, not because of the fortune, but because she had finally seen what her grandson had seen all along, a woman of steel and grace, worthy of the name Blackwood. The estate did not fall into ruin. Alina's inheritance paid the debts, and the Duke, freed from financial shackles, proved himself a capable and compassionate master. The tenants, who had feared they would lose their homes, came to love the new Duchess, who visited their cottages with remedies and kindness. Lady Beatrice married a baronet within the year and moved to Bath. Elinor bore no grudge. She had won, after all, not because she had fought, but because she had loved. And the Duke, he became a different man. The shadows left his eyes. He laughed more, loved fiercely, and told his wife every single day that she was the greatest blessing of his life. On their first anniversary, they walked through the gardens of Ashworth House, now restored to its former glory. The Duchess paused by the rose arbor, remembering the night she had stood on the terrace, certain she would have to leave him forever. "What are you thinking?" the Duke asked, sliding his arms around her waist. "I am thinking that I almost lost you," she said. "That I almost walked away because I believed I was not enough." He pressed his lips to her temple. "You were always enough. You were the only one who ever saw me. The man, not the title, the heart, not the fortune." She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she had come to know better than her own. "I would choose you again," she said. "In every life, in every world, I would choose you." He smiled, a real smile, warm and open, and full of everything he had once kept hidden. "And I would chase you across every one of them, Elinor Blackwood, until you caught me too." The wind stirred the roses, and somewhere in the distance, the bells of the village church began to ring. The Duke and his Duchess stood together in the garden, their shadows stretching long across the lawn, their hands intertwined, their hearts finally at peace. And they lived, not merely as lord and lady, but as equals, partners, and the kind of love that survives fire and emerges, not unscathed but stronger. The Duke had once chosen another bride. But in the end, he had chosen the woman who saved him, not only from ruin, but from the emptiness of a life without love.